Hi, this is a test of the mic. Hi, this is a test of the mic. Perfect.
The microphone's unmuted.
The microphone is not plugged in.
It is plugged in. I plugged it in a long time ago. Oh, Katie's about to start. And whoever's on a live stream, we're about to start with Katie.
Hello. Oh, I don't think it's connected. Is it? Oh, I don't think it's on.
It is. It's not. It doesn't connect to the room.
Oh. So there's no mic.
There's no microphone.
Okay. Now? Hello, everybody! And welcome back to golang-syd. Wow, sorry, I had to shout there because this mic doesn't actually work. So.
This mic is for the live stream.
Oh, okay. So yeah. But can you all hear me if I talk like this at the back there? Yeah. Okay. So I think the last time that I saw you guys was back in December 2019, which was Go's 10th birthday bash with Rob Pike, and it was my birthday celebrations too. I remember that. But yeah, oh my God, it's been ages, hasn't it? So happy to see you all, and yeah, thank you for coming, everybody. I know obviously we've had some recent changes to adapt to with working from home and stuff, so if anyone's managed to pull yourself out of the house and get into the city for golang-syd, thank you very much for coming tonight, thank you. And also for anyone who's come after work, honestly it's so nice to see you. So I don't want to bore you, I don't want to waffle on, but I do have something that I'd like to share with you actually. So the other day, a few of us went out for some dinner, and someone actually asked me the question, Katie, why do you do this? So I thought, you know what, I should probably let you know if anyone else here might have thought the same thing, because obviously, the question was, why do you do this? Why do you organise these events? Why do you spend your time out of work doing this? You don't even code, why do you love it so much? So the answer is, I have to admit, I actually do really get a kick out of bringing people together. And I'm really proud of what me and Chewy have built with creating a vibe of, people to meet together and, learn stuff from each other and, just help each other in growing in our careers. So that's my why. And also, I guess you could kind of say it's an extension of what I do for a living, which, by the way, I've actually recently changed jobs myself after 5 years. I've had to crunch some numbers, and I didn't realise I've actually helped over 150 Go engineers find their next role with over 30 different Go companies in Sydney. So I've had the privilege of working with a lot of you here tonight, I can see. Some of you I don't recognise, so please feel free to connect with me. If you see that I'm there as Golang Girl, I somehow managed to adopt that name over the years, but I kind of just ran with it. But yeah, that's me. So if you have any questions about the market, if you're looking for your next role in the next 6 to 12 months, or looking to hire in the next 6 to 12 months, then hit me up. Let's have a phone call, Zoom, coffee. I'd love to see you. So I would now like to invite Chewy up onto the stage, and I would also like to thank Industry & Co, who have put everything together for us tonight, especially Michael. Michael's actually the person who's hit me up what's going on with golang-syd? And yeah, without you, Michael, this wouldn't have happened, so thank you. Yeah. And I would also like to thank our speakers. We've got Stefano and we've got Andrew, who's here tonight to give us some talks. And I think, Chris is flown in from Melbourne. I haven't met Chris yet. Where's Chris? Hi, Chris. Sorry. Hi. Yeah, so thank you. I'm going to pass you on to Chewy. Do I have to give this over? Yes. Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. I'll pass you over. Oh, my goodness. It's really weird. It doesn't work. Oh. Sorry. There you go. Thank you, guys.
So.
I don't have as much to say with Casey because 2020 never happened. The last meetup we had was in March 2020 with Kelsey Hightower, and then that's April 2021. I mean, who knows what happened between, right? So, obviously there are things like our meetup group getting hijacked and all that. So if you see like our meetup group is private and all that, don't worry. We're in the process of getting that back. Meetup's front end is a bit broken, so the settings don't actually stay. But yeah, I don't have much to say, so I'd like to invite Mike up to give a few words about what Industry & Co. is.
Thanks, Chewy. I'm head of Cloud and DevOps here in Industry & Co. And Industry & Co., just so you know, consulting company, development company. We've got about 160 people scattered over 4 sites, Sydney, Melbourne, Hong Kong, and I think I can say Singapore. So it's all been a good ride so far, and I also want to let you know that we are looking for a few Golang developers to help us out. So if you happen to be looking for something better to do, let me know, because we've got a couple of gigs that could definitely use your help. It's a company where it's vertically integrated. We don't do horizontal, we do vertically integrated solutions. So from strategy and design to UX, UI, mid-tier engineering, back-end engineering, cloud, DevOps, test automation, and also some delivery side stuff. So Scrum Masters, delivery, agile, ways of working, safe, et cetera, et cetera. But great to see you guys tonight. It's been a pleasure being able to host this. So without further ado, back to Chewy.
I lied. I said I had nothing to say. I lied. I forgot. We've got giveaways. So we've got stickers, Gorgonia stickers, and a 3D printed gopher. If anyone's interested, there you go. We will have some quizzes and we'll give them away. And the fact that Katie, Andrew, myself, and Mike are actually wearing GopherCon t-shirts, I wonder what's going on with that. But without further ado, I would like to introduce Stefano.
Thanks, guys. Sorry. Okay, all good. Sorry. All good. Here we go, JavaScript and Go. So this is not going to be a long talk, and it's about a little utility that I found out while I was in my previous job. I'm currently rocked, but as I think the next slide says, some of you may know me. I don't recognize anyone in the room. You guys know that there's 50,000 people in engineering in Sydney. It's crazy. There's a lot of people that do that. My previous company was an IoT startup, and we were working with building a platform, and part of it was in Go. And so this is the outcome of one of our kind of projects. Now, this is what I want to cover tonight. Not too long, don't worry. First of all, why would I put JavaScript in Go? I mean, if you like Go, JavaScript is horrible. Like, let's say it's got its pitfalls, but why would I do it? And the second bit is I want to cover the Auto library, which is a Golang library, which I want to cover. Hopefully everything is working, yeah. As well as how to actually integrate it. Now, it turns out that scripting is as old as software engineering, let's say, and there's nothing new really. The idea is that why would I want to introduce a scripting language within, for example, a piece of software or a platform or whatever you're selling or you're building, you can tell I was in a startup about selling. So the reason is primarily for 2 reasons. You want to have dynamic behavior, or you want to customize your software. Now, you may think, well, I can customize my software just by, adding new features as the customers ask. But at some point, you hit a roadblock where you're adding a lot of features for a lot of customers, and then your piece of your software is kind of a little bit of a piecemeal kind of mix of a lot of things, and every customer wants something slightly different. I'm giving here the example of Lua. Lua is actually an old scripting language, but is the one that has got the most success lately. You might have heard of OpenResty. If this looks alien to you, don't worry. This is an Nginx configuration file. And with OpenResty, you can just specify that some parts of a configuration is managed by a Lua script. As I say, customization and dynamic behavior. So this is an example of dynamic behavior, right? You want to make sure that your configuration changes when, depending on something you got in a database, for example. Another example, Redis. I actually love Redis. I was a speaker at the conference a few times. One of the very first features that were introduced into Redis was this idea of evaluating Lua scripts from version 2.6. And the reason is that the guy that wrote Redis understood how important it is to actually be allowing people to build up onto the basic elements of Redis itself to build more complex data structures. This is an example of how you use it. Now, it's all fun and games. So I talked about Lua, so now you might ask yourself, why JavaScript? Now, the reason about JavaScript is that it's extremely popular. And it's obviously intuitive and familiar in terms of syntax, and there's a very quick learning curve. Now, there is, if you look at it, it's definitely the most popular language and the most popular scripting language by long and far. This is taken from Stack Overflow. I think they do a survey every year. And I think I got a slide here. Yes, so this is out of 2 days ago. Even the Oracle database, I don't know if there's anyone that's actually worked with that. I'm saying I'm not old enough to had to use that. But apparently, sorry, man. Sorry, I take that back. Sorry, I take it back. Now, apparently they introduced this with a new release. Now, under the hood, I think they're using the Graal VM, which has been around for quite a while, which is a virtual machine in Java that actually runs JavaScript. But the whole idea that you can actually write JavaScript, like I don't know if I can show it, like as part of your transaction, your functions, I guess. It looks like a transaction kind of thing. It's quite. It's telling about the fact that it's actually a really easy scripting language. Now, one of the problems is introducing JavaScript in anything is that JavaScript was not designed with. Yeah, that is JavaScript, right? That's the thing. It wasn't designed for security in mind. It was designed in a weekend kind of thing, by the way. You got a problem around resource starvation, right? If you accept a script coming from third party that can just enter a script and then run it on your platform, you have to have ways to stop the script from doing anything nasty. It could be security related, but it could also be related to, I don't know, doing a while true and or infinite loops or something really stupid. And obviously you have to manage through some sort of timeouts. Now, I kind of introduced it a little bit when I started. Obviously, the use case in this for us, my previous company, was data manipulation. So the platform itself was written in JavaScript, to be honest. It was TypeScript, but it had some component in Golang and some component in JavaScript. And we had this need to actually allow people to write their own custom parsers. You may be asking why. Well, because we are enrolling a lot of devices built by third parties, these devices would uplink or upload payloads that were in binary format, and it was really at the beginning it was easy for us to add that baked into our platform, the parsers themselves, but then it became actually cumbersome because we just couldn't keep up with it. So the first thought that we had was actually to run JavaScript in JavaScript, right? Makes sense. Now, interestingly, there's this very nice library called VM2 that is actually an extension of VM. If you don't know about it, it's okay, but this is just a little bit of a joke. It's talking about how it's supposed to be secure and immune to all known method of attacks. But then, if you look at the issues and the various reported, there's always issues of security. So you just can't run JavaScript in JavaScript. That's the long and the short. So even if you love Golang and you want to build a tool that is just JavaScript in JavaScript, it's a bit hard. I think only AWS may do something like this, or I might be wrong with Lambda. But again, the AWS, they have a big budget to manage that. Now, what we want to do is that if we want to do other scripting capabilities and we like Golang and we have building tools with Golang, we can use this library. It's called Otto. It was developed by Robert Creamer. I think he was actually working at Amazon, by the way, from my little bit of research. It's actually open source. It's quite stable. It's been around for many years. So how would I describe it? It's a bare bone ES5 implementation in Golang. So when I say bare bone, is that there's not much in it. There's no string manipulation apart from concatenation, I think. There is no window object. There's nothing. You can, there's no module that you can exploit really from a security perspective to do much. So all you can do is that you can get data in, massage the data, manipulate it a bit, and return it. It's, when I say secure by design, of course, nothing is secure 100%, but given it's the interpreter is only 100 lines of code, it's relatively simple to see what's happening. And it's also quite easy to use. Unfortunately, the guy that wrote it did not stop maintaining a long time ago, and the repo has got something like 20 different maintainers. And there's a guy in Melbourne, maybe he's listening to us, and please get back to me. I wanted to be added as one of the maintainers, but he never got back to me. He sometimes commits some fixes, but not too much. So as we integrated it, we forked it. Unfortunately, it was the only way to do it, to fix a couple of small issues. There's a lot of pull requests open, but it's production ready. I mean, it wasn't even our ideas to use it. There's a few IoT platforms out there, open source, that use this. Nowhere to the level of sophistication where we implemented it, and they just blindly use it. We fixed a few bugs, and I'll cover the sophistication in a second. Now, in its simple version, I hope you guys can see from the bottom. I may be covering it with the stand here, but it's a fairly simple library to use. But in reality, when you actually go and actually use it, and you want to allow someone to write a custom script, and you want to have some level of tidiness around it, it becomes a little bit more like this. Now, don't worry, I'll go through the code relatively quickly to show what each section is. It looks very messy, but there's a reason for everything there. So obviously, we need a way to pass some data in. Interestingly, everything is passed as an object in JavaScript. So whatever custom data you have, it could be strongly typed, of course. It's actually just translated to the kind of the closest correspondent. There are some issues in this area, but I didn't encounter any of those. The issues were in terms of the pull requests that I've seen open. Yeah, to me, it just quite works out of the box, not really that much thinking. Obviously, you're running your own script, but you need a wrapper. And you need a wrapper because I'm just going to cover in a second because one of the reasons. So primarily, obviously, you want to try and catch what you're running, because obviously, if there's any exception in your JavaScript, you want to catch that. You don't want to cause the Go routine to die. You actually introduce a script at the top, and this helps because it helps with line numbers, all right, in case there's an exception. And then you want to invoke it. Now, what are you invoking here? If you see, you're invoking a specific function in JavaScript. I call it custom script. Obviously, you can call it whatever you want, but the whole idea is that the script itself will contain a definition of this function, which will accept this custom data. Now, the custom data comes from up above there. So you want to do that, but at the same time, you want to add maybe some additional classes or additional functions. A typical one is a console log. A lot of people, when you use JavaScript, they just go off, there's console log. Now, console log doesn't exist, so you have to add it manually. So as part of your, you have to inject it. But you may have additional classes. For example, we were adding all the buffer classes. If you're familiar with JavaScript or Node.js, there's buffer classes that let you read buffers like byte streams and read them into numbers or strings. So we added those in. You actually obviously invoke. Sorry, of course, these are actually defined as strings in Golang within your repo. All right. So this is an example. So you can define a console to go to nothing. But one of the things that we found very useful is letting people actually log to a console, collect the information, and then return that as well, because you can actually read that out. And I'll show you in a second, I think. Yes. Here's how you read the data out. So I've covered at the beginning, at the top, obviously how we run the script. And this is how you get the data out. So you got a return object. If you don't know what that is actually coming back from, let me go back. It's coming back from here. I said return object equals to custom script, right? So So, sorry, I'm making your life harder on this. And obviously, you want to manage any error. Okay, so you wanna make sure that you capture that error. So, and you also wanna make sure you capture the console, as I was explaining before. The console is useful, I think, because it lets people. If you're thinking about it from a developer experience, when a script doesn't work, you might want to actually the first thing that before we had instrumentation, and in this case you don't have any instrumentation. The first thing you had is like printf back in the day, and console log is effectively the same concept. But also you want to validate the data here, because a return object is actually an empty interface, so you have to cast it to something. So I have omitted it here for the sake of brevity, but there was, I would say 70-80% of the code was actually to make sure that the data return made sense. It was not something random or something malicious in any way. And that's where a lot of the work goes effectively. Now, how does this look in practice? This is how we ended up putting it all together. The idea is effectively that, obviously, maybe I'll just hold it in my hand. I'm just so worried. Okay. So basically, you want to have something that, I put an incoming request. It can be coming from anything or a cron job or anything. You want to run your custom script. So obviously the custom script needs some data, which is what I call the, custom data, I think it's called in an example. You have your JavaScript script saved somewhere in the DB. This is how you're using it, right? So you just pass the data and the JavaScript to a freestanding service, all right, written in Golang. Now it could be, this is the way we deployed it was a sidecar container. If you're not familiar with that or with Docker in general, it's just a container that sits next to the main container, and in every server you have them all paired together effectively. And the idea is that you want to distinguish your code, I call your APIs, it could be written in Golang as well, from where you're actually running the scripts. And the reason is because you don't want to trust those scripts. And so even if there was a security issue, you can only get access to this, so you can't get access to your APIs. And this is totally stateless, so it doesn't need access to any database or anything. That would be the way we implement it and the way we design it. And so so you effectively get the results of your computation, plus, I said, the console. In this case, it's because you want to have some sort of metadata as well. We capture the runtime, we capture potential errors. That's kind of pretty much it. So now, how do you actually manage this? Now, this is the way we implemented it. So we actually we were giving the users an admin interface, and we started experimenting with the Monaco, I think, editor. If you guys are not familiar with that, it's actually what powers Visual Studio Code. It's pretty cool, and you can just embed it in your single page web application. I got a screenshot afterward. And that gives you out of the box, it gives you autocomplete for basic JavaScript functions. And so you let people use effectively Visual Studio Code in your SPA. They can type your, and if it's syntactically wrong, it won't actually let you, it will actually do code error highlighting, and it will actually return in the errors in a list of errors, so you can actually give that feedback to the user and stop them from saving something that would not work. Obviously, you store the JavaScript, and then you also offer, and this is what we did, is that we offer the capability to test the script straight away, so people would write the script and test it with some test data and get some data back. What we did, though, what we found out is that it was actually much easier if we actually moved straight away from JavaScript straight to TypeScript. If you're not familiar, and with TypeScript you should be, it's just types on top of JavaScript. And the advantage is when you do that, the Visual Studio Code editor will give you autocomplete and a higher level of error handling. And so it would really, and then you can also use. You can also then use ES6, which you are barred from using because obviously runtime doesn't support it because it's only ES5, right? ES5 is very, very old, and ES6 has got, I think, it's fixed most of the issues with ES5. So you wanna let people use these capabilities. So what you do is that you're effectively sending the TypeScript and you're storing the TypeScript. Now, what do you do though when you want to run it? Well, we did this, and it actually worked out really well. You can embed a TypeScript compiler straight into your APIs. Now, if your APIs are not written in JavaScript, you can still do it by having a service, and it's crazy because it's one line. I mean, in this presentation, I put a lot of code, so I didn't add that, but you literally can compile to TypeScript in one line. Originally, we had no cache, then we added a caching layer, so in case you recompile the same thing over and over, but it's actually pretty fast. The small script compiles in like 2 or 3 milliseconds. It's not too bad. So that your runner runs JavaScript, ES5 JavaScript, and returns the results back to you. So this is how it looks in practice, by the way. I know it's already all blurry. Sorry, maybe the people in the streaming will see it better, but the idea is you're effectively, this looks like VS Code, the dark theme. And you have all sorts of nice syntax highlighting as well as fixes. I mean, I don't want to give you what's it called, a demo here because it's a software from my previous company. I mean, I don't think it's, but just to give you an idea, I think this gives the idea you can just literally, if you like coding in this, we've had people that hadn't touched code in 10 years, being able to manipulate stuff. Because if you see, our use case was actually very much on adding, multiplying, dividing, adding constants, because it was for calibration of sensors, right? So it's actually fairly easy to do that, even if you're not technically very skilled. The way we did it is that we made a lot of examples for people to do it, and then we let the people go nuts. And the feedback was really good. Like the people that used it really liked it. My boss was the CTO in the company was really, really happy about it. He could write his own parsers. He was really happy. Now, there are some edge cases that are handled for you by Otto. Now, I lie a little bit here because this one isn't handled. I had to open a pull request, but it was, it's still pending. So in my fork, it is handled. Otherwise, it's not. So you have a situation where obviously infinite loops shouldn't kill your service, right? So your service sits here. You don't want it to die or wait forever on the Go routine. So you want that to be interruptible. It does handle divides by 0. And obviously, it does handle the fact that you want to try and call system APIs that exist in Node.js. The code will fail because they're not defined. Just as simple as that. But as I say, data validation is key in ingress and in output. Obviously, in the first example, called the function custom function, someone can write a script and call it, whatever. The problem is you need to validate that the function is defined. The function that you want is defined. Otherwise, there will be nothing to invoke, and an invocation will fail. Now, interestingly, the way we were doing it is quite easy. You can do it in 2 ways. Given that the platform was JavaScript, you can actually download multiple libraries that do. They build the AST tree of. It's when you parse a programming language, you get an AST tree, which is effectively like a in-memory representation of your script. And then you can literally go through it and see if there is a function that matches the name that you want it. So that's the first thing. You have to check the return data format. Of course, you have to. If what you get is crap, then you don't know how to use it. You don't want to do it. You have to limit the size of the script. People can write very long ones. I had people that just were copying and pasting just to see how big they could make it. And you also have to limit the execution time. Now, this is a little bit more of a more complicated exercise. The way you do it, this is taken from the example from Otto as well. So obviously, the way you do it in Golang is the usual, panic and recover, if you're familiar with Golang. So the whole idea is that you create a Go routine. You let it sleep for 50. In this case, it was 50 milliseconds. We thought that was appropriate for us. Obviously, it depends on the use case. The VM, which is effectively Otto, right, offers a channel where you can actually send an error through, and you can send actually anything, and it will interrupt the execution. Then you panic on the error, and then you recover on it. And if the error matches the reason why you panicked on before, which is down here, which is error timeout exceeded. Sorry, I make it hard for you, mate. Then you know that you've timed out, so you can actually report an error that you've timed out, and off you go. We've tested it in many ways with different types of ways to break into, and it was very reliable, and It's been in production for a year and a half. Like we've had millions of executions. It's worked quite well, and that's it. That's it for me. So. Yes.
I've got a question.
Yes, sure.
Have I heard of Lisp?
Yes.
Okay, why not Lisp?
Nobody knows how the syntax. Although I'm learning Clojure.
There is no syntax in this, it's all semantics.
Yeah. What Gary said is true.
Okay.
It's all parentheses.
Oh, but yeah, it's not as user friendly.
Yeah, true. Kind of.
It's not high on Stack Overflow.
All right. Anyone else have any questions? All right.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got 2 questions. So
Yeah, sure.
I need to repeat.
can you repeat the questions for the
Yeah, sure. I'll repeat it.
So I see you've used like VM, like a JavaScript VM inside Golang to kind of parse and execute everything. Maybe WebAssembly was in your radar at the same time, because you could have used it as a way to kind of isolate the execution, so you don't have JavaScript stuff calling whatever syscall.
Correct me if I'm wrong with Okay, so the question is, yeah, I'll repeat the question. The question is, why didn't we choose WebAssembly, for example? Two main reasons, I would say, and maybe it's lack of knowledge on my end. I love the idea of WebAssembly. I don't know what's the tooling and how production ready it is. This library has been around for 5 years, 6 years, and it's used extensively. The second reason is, well, if you use WebAssembly, it works, but you have to compile it into a WebAssembly, right?
Online, it's possible.
Yeah, so you would have to accept the script, compile it, and then
Keep the script and the compiled version.
yes. I don't know what's the tooling, because you would have to use Golang to then run it. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, so there are
Yeah.
whole VMs that can run WebAssembly compiled
Okay.
inside Golang. So it is basically the same thing, just gives you the exported functions and results and all that. You can just probe outside.
Okay.
So the approach would be the same, it's just the runtime would be different.
Yeah, I think it would be. I'll be honest. If maybe it is. All right, I don't want to say it isn't, but if it is production ready, yes, it is superior to this. I would say when it becomes more mainstream, absolutely.
Thanks.
Yes.
How do you do infinite loop detection? That's kind of hard to do. Like pass the RFST and inspect that, or
No, I tell you what, okay. This isn't an easy one. So the library has got 2 parts. One is the AST, it generates that. And then the actual code that runs through, it's a for loop that runs through the AST to execute it. It's actually 50 lines, something like that. It's really, really small. And I think we managed, there was you're testing my memory, but there was an event where we were seeing the same path multiple times, and after a certain amount of times, we knew that it was looping. I think it was the situation where, yes, there was no break. I think that there was a check. There was no break in the loop and no way that it could potentially break, and we were determining by that. But you might say that maybe there's ways to work around my fix, potentially. I tried it. It kind of worked over time, like for what I could try. And none of our customers managed to break that. Interestingly, we had issues where people, instead of using the equal, they were using equal in a comparison. And that was throwing an error that was totally unrelated, but it was still catching it. Like it was not working properly, but it wasn't hanging. So yes, it's not a perfect solution, but yes. I mean, if you want to know what the fix for that, I sent a pull request that has got, I think it's got this name here. I think it's got this name, and I would have to review what I'd done, but I was really chuffed with myself. So I think it kind of worked. It not just worked; it was correct logically, right? Let's put it that way. So.
Just curious, how often does the runtime check for those interrupts? So if you send something, can you starve out the interrupts, or will it always process them eventually?
It always processes eventually because it uses just a very, so, sorry, I didn't repeat the question. So how often does auto processes the channel, the interrupt channel? It processes over time because it's got this for loop that continuously run. As it runs, every time it will check it every instruction that it runs, everyone. So it works really well. Like when it's 50 milliseconds, it's kind of on the dot, of course. So, yeah.
Sorry, what were you using to convert the TypeScript to JavaScript? Were you just using
TypeScript?
the
So,
TSC?
TS, compiler. It's. I was surprised. I thought it was going to be very complicated. It's one line. You say TS dot.
TSC.
Yeah, no, but yes. So yes, correct. We don't call an external program. We embedded it within our platform. All right. So our Node.js had a TS compiler built in, so it's bundled up, and we imported TypeScript. There's so it's not very well documented, but you can import just TypeScript as a module in Node.js. Okay, and that's why I said TS, because we rename it TS. And then it's got a public method which is compile, and it will compile whatever you pass it as a string into JavaScript. Again, I thought it was not a great idea, but the performance was really good. I was impressed. It really runs really fast.
So was there a Node server as part of the solution?
Yes. So I didn't cover. So most of we had, it's a microservice architecture. This bit was in JavaScript. Okay, so we bolted the TS compiler onto this set of the APIs. Some of the other microservices were in Golang, but this one had JavaScript built in.
So question, why not just use Node?
Because you didn't pay attention. Sorry, I had to say. Because we looked into it, but running Node in Node is a pain. Like this is.
No, but you run Node in a Docker container to the side.
Yes, but how many? I mean, you're going to spin a Docker container for every execution? Like, you're going to spin a Docker container like this. You're suggesting this. Sorry, let me see if I, library. Yeah, you're suggesting, why don't I run this in Node, all right, to run your JavaScript? Is that your suggestion, something on the side?
You run something on the side.
Yes. Now, if you do that, the issue that you have is that under the hood it uses eval, and there is no way you can stop it. From a security standpoint, there's no way you can block it. You lock it down. There is no way. So that's what I was saying. This library here was our first choice. Okay? VM2 does exactly what you're suggesting. So it runs in JavaScript, right? And it lets you run VM. By the way, is part of Node. VM2 is this version that this guy has made, which looks really good. Because under the hood it still evals the data, there's plenty of issues. Now, this I just copied one that, from a security standpoint, you can still take over the container. Once you've taken over the container, it's effectively, it's kind of, I wouldn't say game over, but from a security standpoint, this is a much bigger footprint. Sorry, does that make sense? What I'm saying? Yeah. Running JavaScript in JavaScript is a no-go. Like this was the first thing with. Does that make sense? I mean, it's a choice in the end of the day, but that was the thinking behind it.
Cool.
Right. Thank you. Right. Thank you.
All right.
Can you just?
Yes, you can unplug it. Thank you. Here's a little fun fact. My oldest big Go. It's not connected to. It's not on anything. So the screen's black. Anyway, my oldest Go project is actually a JavaScript engine and a browser, because I wanted to read Hacker News on the terminal, so that my coworkers would think I was working. If you want to look at that, just come find me. But we'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back with Chris. Okay, well, thank you for coming back. Let me just switch scenes to the live scene. All right, thank you for coming back. We've got a talk from Chris Donovan, who was from Melbourne. I just got news that it's going to be a very short talk, so we're going to immediately go into Andrew's talk after this. And he will be talking about Go Cube Extract. Take it away, Chris.
Thanks. Yeah, so do DevOps work at Industry & Co. We have a specific client where we have this software called Thought Machine, which is it's a core banking application, so runs inside of Kubernetes, has a few hundred services out of 1,000 containers plus. And one of the things we have to do if there's an error that we see, we basically deliver a support bundle to Thought Machine, and they need this. So it basically the support bundle scrapes all the logs, all the events, everything else, right? So all the state of the cluster and everything, and then they analyze it and give us feedback, what we should do, bug fix, patches, that kind of stuff. So there's nothing Go specific yet except for Kubernetes, but one of the problems that we have is it can take upwards of, I think 6 days was the maximum time for us to be able to log into a production environment due to change request, access and that kind of stuff. So it doesn't make any sense for a non-critical bug to take 6 days. That was a problem. There was several different change request processes that we had to go through, ticketing systems, etc., approval processes. They were kind of a nightmare. And so, kind of thought about it. We wanted this automated, so just wrote a service, Kubernetes service, deployed it, and then too many. So the thought process for how to do this was what should we write it in? So we had an internal discussion. We were like, okay, do we want shell? Do we want Perl? I like Perl. Sorry, guys, people. So we decided that it was pretty easy. There was a lot of client Go module stuff out there, software reusable. It was native to Kubernetes, so it seemed one of those things that was the right choice. Your mileage might vary. So we have a couple of things fit into we have pipelines. How do we do this? How do we get it the business approved for this process to occur? So we kind of made it just a service that listens on a particular port. We hit it. It spins up a deployment replica, so it scales it up. Pod starts. The pod kicks off the container. The container then does its job to gather the support bundle, scrapes everything, events, logs, etc., and then delivers it over HTTP connection or HTTPS connection for this, and scales the replica down to 0. And so that was pretty much it. So instead of minimum 24 hours, maximum 6 days, minute and a half. So took just about a day and a half for me to code up, and yeah. So with this, obviously, internal to the cluster, you've got operators and you've got a bunch of other stuff. I don't know who's familiar with Kubernetes, but all the Go routines, modules and stuff are out there. So yeah, these are the references. This is the source code that's out there. You can have a look. It's obviously not functional at the moment because you need Thought Machine to be able to do that, but you can make some, I guess mock ones up, but yeah, and that's it. So it's not a lot of detail like the previous one, sorry, but this is basically what we thought was a good fit for purpose, why we should use Go. It's native, it handles the cluster, libraries already exist, yeah.
You need an Elixir script.
Yeah.
Why are you pushing Lisp? It's my character for today. I'm pushing Lisp and Emacs. But this guy put Vim in his slide, so I have to push Emacs a bit.
So this plugin here, by the way, the Vim Go plugin by Faith. So this is my first Go program. I don't know if I mentioned that. So the easy part was adding this Vim plugin, and then as I started typing stuff out, it would add the modules real time for the imports. So I didn't really have to think much or look. So I went, oh, that's there, done. That's there, done. Built all the Go mods and everything. So yeah, it was pretty good.
Cool.
Questions? Anything? No? Good?
Oh, well, fabulous.
Thanks. Sweet.
Questions for the Kubernetes people? No? Okay, we will immediately transfer to Andrew's talk.
He just went to the toilet.
Cool. In the meantime, we can waffle a bit
I've
here.
got a question.
Sure.
How did you find your first Go experience?
Easy.
Yeah?
Pretty easy. Probably harder to sit in front of people that I don't publicly talk to. So, yeah.
No, I mean like with what you've built. You said
Yeah,
the
yeah.
first
That was
time,
much
yeah.
easier than standing up here and telling you people about it. So, yeah.
But what would you have usually used if you hadn't have used Go?
Oh, Pearl.
Pearl, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you're a
Yeah.
Pearl guy.
Yeah, from way back. Back when I used to work with Oracle. Where's he at? Yeah.
Do you think you'll go back to Pearl now? That
I still use Perl all the time, but yeah, mostly I just do Kubernetes stuff at home and play around. Work obviously pays for a lot of that fun.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you very much, Chris.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Yep. It is live. Everything's live all the time. All right, let's set up. Okay, you can just there you go. Just drag it to the other side. Mm. Andrew, microphone. Yep.
I'm going to put this on. Okay.
And I will tell you whether it's okay.
Is this?
Yeah.
Go ahead here.
Okay, can you stand? And we need to move this up a bit.
I'm too tall for it.
Yeah, you're a bit tall.
Is that all right?
Okay.
How's that?
Yep. All right, we'll be talking about generics.
Oh,
Who's
yeah,
excited? All right. FYI, we've got a few more Gogonia stickers, and Gogonia is a generic. Long before generics, the Gogonia is a generic multi-dimensional array for Go, like NumPy. If you want stickers, ask questions, okay? Take it away, Andrew.
Yeah, put your hands together for Andrew.
Thank you.
Oh, I forgot. Tweeting is mandatory. I've not run this for such a long time, I forgot about it. So, hashtag golang-syd. Go. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, first I'll just mention that this got nothing to do with me. I just borrowed my son's laptop to display this. Nothing to do with premonition.
Best plug it.
Anyway, I was going to talk about generics today in two parts. Firstly, just a quick rundown of where generics is at for the Go language.
Can you speak louder?
Oh, no, you just have to make
Oh,
it
sorry,
yeah.
for everybody else, not for this. And also for the range set class, which is a generic class that I've created using the Go2Go tool, which Robert Griesman has created. I've been keenly following the progress of generics for some time, and I'm just trying to get everybody familiar with the syntax and how it might appear in the language when it actually comes out. Looks like it might come out within next year or year and a half or so, as far as I can tell. Has anybody else been following it much, or? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, so apparently a lot of gophers are a bit scared of generics. I don't know why, but I'm just trying to get people to, familiar with the syntax. And anyway, first I'm going to go back in time. A bit of a plug. How does this work? Here we go. This is the last Go meetup that I went to in December 2019. This is a fantastic event, although I might have had my beer goggles on because I'd just come from my work Christmas party at the time. But we had Rob Pike talking about Go and a bit about Go2, which is basically generics. although it won't be in Go 2, but anyway. And we had Dave's quiz, which was a lot of fun, and then Chris Davitt, which is what I really wanted to plug, because he talked about how to give a tech presentation, which has sort of inspired me to do this today. So it's taken a long time to come. I think you can see Chris in the background there, just looking at his laptop. Anyway. So I guess the point of this slide is just to promote Chris, and I only just found this morning, you can go and look at the whole video of this meeting, which the audio is a bit bad towards the end. It's better towards the start. Okay. Now, well, this is what really inspired me to do this talk, because I've been following all the Go language issues on GitHub, and there's a few comments like this. This is probably the most egregious, which is saying adding generics is going against the simplicity of Go, and that it basically the guy was saying he doesn't like the idea of generics. It's going to make Go too complicated, and there's no real use to it. Does anybody agree with that?
Yes and no. I mean, I kind of agree.
Hands up, hands up. There's one hand. Just for the record. Just anyway.
Check his name later.
So, well, this is sort of for those people to try and get them familiar with the syntax, and just to help them accept that it might actually make their life simpler rather than more complicated. Anyway. Well, the other question I was going to ask you is hands up if you think that generics might make you build slower. Well, that was one of my real worries, because I really like the fact that Go builds pretty fast. But using a Go-to-Go tool, I haven't done any benchmarks, but it seems to be quite fast. And I'm hoping once it's actually built into the language, because the Go-to-Go tool is like a preprocessor which converts Go2 to Go file. So yeah, I think it's going to be good. So I don't think it's going to affect the build times too much at all. I'm basically from a C++ background, so I just wanted to say that I've used C++ before and after it got templates, and templates made a big difference to it. Not that I use all the horrendous facilities in C++. I also use C#1 and then C#2, which added generics. So this talk's supposed to show you that generics are not scary and will make your life simpler. Okay, so I'm not sure how much people know about generics. I'm sure there's a few here that know a lot, but for those who don't, there are two forms basically: generic functions and generic types. And actually Go really has these generic things already. Like a generic type, an array or slice or mapper are already in a generic type in a way, because the type parameter for example, a slice, the type parameter is the type of the element that you're using. But
pointers also generically. Go on, sorry.
That's all right. So the whole point of the proposal is, that was the other question I was going to ask. Does anybody know of any Go generic functions that are built in to the language?
Make.
Yeah.
Sorry. Append. Yes.
And new. New. Okay. Yeah.
New's cheating.
Okay, new as well.
They all take a parameter, which is the type, not a value. So the proposal is to add user-defined generic types, so you can create your own generic types and functions. So this is just a quick example. So the main thing here is, the new thing is, in the square brackets is a type, well, that's what makes it a generic function. This is a min function. I guess you can guess what it does. it takes a type parameter, which is in square brackets. Then it takes the actual runtime parameters, which are in round brackets. And this type parameter is saying that the two other parameters for the function are of the same type. And it's comparing them. Now, has anybody got any idea what this constraints.ordered? That's obviously from the name, it's a constraint of the
That'd be like the Java comparable.
I don't know much about Java, but
Yeah, it is like Java comparable.
When you do a generic, you can do the same with in Java, but you say T comparable.
yeah, okay, yeah, I think I know what you mean. It's basically saying that the types that the min function are constrained to accept, so v1 and v2 must be of type constraints.ordered, and if you went into the constraints package, which will be part of the standard library, it will show you that constraints.ordered just refers to any all the types which support the comparison, like less than and greater than, whatever. So that, anyway, that's a generic function. The main thing is highlighted, which is the type parameter, which is what makes it a generic function. This is a generic type. Here it's just like a normal type declaration, but once again you've got the generic parameters in square brackets. In this case you've got two generic parameters, T1 and T2, and you're creating a struct with those fields of those two types.
Sorry, shouldn't the function return a T?
Yeah, you're right.
Sticker.
I haven't
I've got sticker.
I haven't tested this code, I just typed it in out of my head, okay? There's probably a lot of mistakes. Okay, I don't know how many people are familiar with C++, and I'm from a C++ background, so I probably can skip most of this, but this is all the stuff in C++, which is not in Go, so it's probably not in the proposal for the Go generics, so it's probably not of interest really to us, but if there's, I don't know, anybody interested in talking about any of these? No. Anyone think we need any of these? I don't think we need any of them. I've used C++ since, well, for a long time, but... Sorry?
I love a good variant.
What? Variant? Oh.
Yeah.
Variadic type parameters. Yeah, that's useful if you wanted to create a tuple type or something, but it's rarely used and there are workarounds.
Not even Haskell has it.
Anyway, I'll skip that because I don't think it's of interest in general. So this is how to use a generic function. This is using the earlier function min. So when you call it, you can provide the type. So remember I won't go back, but the generic min function took one type parameter, which is what we're being instantiated with float 64 in this case. So in this case we're finding the min of float 64, 3 and 5. Yeah. That'll be right. Yeah, I'm just thinking if there's any type conversions needed. No. I haven't tested this code, as I said. And the next, you don't really need in this case to put the type parameter in because it can be inferred from the actual parameters. So if you say min 3, 5, it will infer that the type parameters of type int. I mean, if you wanted int 32 or something, you'd have to say int 32. And if you wanted float, you put 3.0 and or something up there.
Can you, in that, I
Yeah.
haven't looked at the latest proposal, can you mix types in that? Did you say min 3.0 and 5?
Well, if you if you go back to here, you can see there's only one type constraint. They're both of the same type. Yep. I mean, you could mix. You'd have to pass one to the same type. All right. Here's a question for you. What does this produce?
Only a C person when asked
I maintain that Booleans are comparable.
Well, they're not in Go. Anyway, anybody got a answer?
Compile error.
Yeah, compile error, obviously, because if you look back at the constraints ordered, Boolean does not support the less than operator. The reason we've got constraints ordered here is so you can use less than. Okay. Oh, this is more using a generic type. So a generic type like the pair one we had before, you can just use it as a pair to assign it to the two fields. But you can also add a method to the pair because you've created your own type. You can have a method, and you can use the pair T1, T2 as a receiver for that method. And you declare it similarly with the T1 and T2. But you can't have a generic method, which is what I've demonstrated down here. This is invalid. So you can have a generic function, you can't have a generic method. Yeah. And that's just an example of the pair type. Oh, I had an example of the pair. I've already done them in, haven't I? Okay. So the constraints has been really the sticking point for the last couple of years of adding generics to Go. And I sort of really didn't understand the point of constraints at all, because from C++, well, C++ recently added, C++ 20 added concepts, but for 20 years they didn't have anything similar. And I thought, oh, yeah, it allows the compiler to generate better error messages. But then I kept reading about it, and I think, oh, I see now. It sort of allows you to create a contract between the writer of the generic, or in this case a function, and the user. So, for example, if without constraints, someone might come into the min function and think, oh, this is a better way to do it. I'll subtract v1 from v2 and make sure it's less than 0. I don't know why, but maybe they think it's more efficient somehow. And
that's how you do it in assembly.
yeah, I thought I just had this funny feeling it was a good way to do it, but in some situations. Daniel told me it wasn't.
Yeah, the CMP instruction actually does the subtraction and adds a flag, overflow.
CMPE in what?
In assembly. Intel. Yeah.
Which Intel is in. Oh. Okay. Anyway, so what would happen is, well, anyway, can anybody guess what would happen if they changed? Yeah, exactly. So constraints at order is saying you need an order type, but it doesn't say you can do subtraction. So this would cause a compilation error. Whereas if you didn't have constraints, someone could go and change this and change the min function, and like min was probably mainly used for integer types. If someone comes along and uses it for a string, suddenly they find, oh, it doesn't work. And like they found out that a couple of years later that someone has changed their code doesn't build anymore because someone has changed how min works. So constraints protects you from that sort of problem. Okay. Yeah. All right. Anyway, so constraints is a pretty technical part of the language. And if you're just using generic functions and types, you wouldn't need to worry about them very much. But even if you're creating generic functions and types, you can, most of the time, you can just use the built-in ones from the constraints package, which is what I did with my generic type that I'm going to show later. All right. I should be looking at the audience, shouldn't I? I did know they've just recently changed the way constraints work. Before they were using contracts, but now they're using the interface keyword to implement this constraints. And it's caused a bit of confusion because some people are thinking, what's this going on? Because it's really using interface for two different things. Using the existing way to use interface is sort of like a runtime operation, whereas now they're using interface to say this is how you constrain as a compile time constraint. And just recently, a few weeks ago, they've fiddled again with the constraints. I'm not sure it was necessary, but they've changed. I don't know if anybody's seen this, but they've changed the way that you specify the types. So previously, you just had a type list, but now this highlighted bit is a I think they call it a type set.
Still that they're saying it's approximation.
Yeah. So the tilde means the underlying. For example, this line here is saying the underlying type must be one of those types. So the tilde means the underlying type is uint. If you took away, well, all right. I wonder if anybody knows this one. What would happen if you removed all the tildes from that constraint?
Only take uint or uintate.
Yeah. But because you're also constraining it to have a string method, and none of those types have string, so that would be a useless constraint.
Yeah, makes sense.
And the compiler won't diagnose these useless constraints, but you've just got to know how it works.
Wait, okay, to clarify, what does the tilde give you?
Sorry, the tilde means the underlying type. So for example, the first one, well, the vertical bar means or. I think everybody knows that, don't they? And the tilde means that type is the underlying type of what you're using. So you can use a uint, or you can use your own type, which is derived from a uint. So basically, this constraint here is saying you must have a derived type which implements the string method and is derived from one of those unsigned integer types. Anyway, it's better to use a standard library. So you can do exactly the same thing by using constraints.unsigned or format.stringer. Except I just realised before, I haven't fixed it yet, but there's a bug in there. Can anybody see it? Sorry? No, it's because you're saying or. So if you're saying it has to be an int or it implements format string, it should be on a separate line to say and. So, yeah.
Don't need the parentheses even.
Oh, sorry. Didn't you?
No.
For a.
Yeah, it's already in interface.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, you're right.
Or you can just write string bracket string, like the.
Yeah, to the actual method. Yeah. So. All right. So there's predefined constraints, which probably what we'd be using if you want to create your own generic types most of the time, except that you might want to add your own methods. So these are all the predefined ones. I think they'll be adding to the language. So I'm not sure if any's built into the language or it's just an alias for interface brackets, but comparable is built into the language because there's no way you can say this set of types is comparable because that's only the compiler can determine if two types are comparable, basically. Comparable means you can use the operator equals or not equals. So anyway, has anybody got any questions on that? Does that make sense? Constraint.ordered means it supports less than or greater than, so all the numeric types plus string, and constraints.integer support any supports integer operations. Oh, and you've got signed and unsigned as well. All right, this is sort of just to fill in the. How am I going for time? 2 minutes. I've only done the first half. All right, I'll just skip this. This is basically what the progress is so far. the main point is the go-to-go tool, which I downloaded and compiled last year to create my generic type, which I'll just quickly explain in a minute. And the fact that the draft proposal has now been converted to a proposal, so it's actually accepted to go into the language. And they've started working on that, I believe, too. There's another branch for that. So generics will probably appear in Go 1.18 or 1.19, I think. So anyway, any questions? Oh, this morning I found a good talk. I didn't realise there was a good talk by Robert Griesmer on GoFCon. It was just, it was just a on video, but it was, yeah.
Question over here, I think.
Oh, sorry.
I've been writing Go for a while now. I still haven't come across a situation where I need generics yet. What are you planning to write with generics once they come out?
Well, I've already written something. I'll just give that to show it.
Can you
but
repeat the question?
Sorry. The question was, what am I planning to use generics for, basically? Maybe I won't need to write my own. Maybe I'll just use those from the standard library. I think the first thing that probably the standard library will do is we'll add a much easier to use sort, like to sort a slice. Now you've got to add all these methods and things. Why not just, with a generic function, you can just say sort slice and it will sort any slice of any type as long as the elements are comparable. Does that answer your question? I'm about to...
It just makes your life easier. It's like saying, why do I need garbage collection? I can manage my own memory.
No, I'm not like, I honestly will probably use generics the moment they come out. I'm just more like, I just haven't hit the wall where I'm like, fuck, I wish I had generics here.
Yeah, I know, that's...
Multi-dimensional tensor. There you go.
Well,
sorry.
Actually, that reminds me, Robert Grossman in his talk said he was a bit worried about the opposite might happen. People will go wild and use generics all over the place, a bit like the channels we used originally. And so he's trying to tone down expectations. Whereas I thought he was trying to encourage people to use generics, but he's trying to say, oh, don't go crazy, So, yeah. Anyway, any other questions? Yes.
Is there any support from Google for this proposal? Because it's usually they're pretty minimalistic.
Well, I don't know. The people working on it are Google employees, I believe, but it's really a community effort nowadays. They like to emphasise that it's not owned. Go's not owned by Google, but a lot of the people who work on it are employed by Google. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I didn't repeat. Did I repeat the question?
Okay, well, go on, range set.
Anything else? All right, I'll quickly go over my range set class, which I created about last year. I downloaded the source, the GitHub repository for the Go, and then switched to the Go-to-Go branch and built the tool. Actually, I was using Windows at the time, so it didn't actually work. There was a slight bug. Sorry, don't judge me for using Windows. I actually built it on Linux as well, and it worked fine. And they fixed it. So, and my type is a generic set type similar to sets.set, which Ian Lance Taylor has created using the Go-to-Go tool as well. So, but it's got some special properties. Rather than storing each element, like Ian Lance Taylor's uses a map underneath, so each item in the set is a map key, whereas mine uses ranges, which means it can only be used basically for sets of integers. But it's very memory efficient and can actually be quite time efficient in some situations too, if you have sets with very, lots of chunks, large ranges of elements. And it has a few other advantages. It returns the elements in order, which a map doesn't do because they're all randomized. And you can actually take the complement of a set. So if you complement an empty set, you'll get a universal set. Then you'll looked at this before and suggested I added some code examples. This is an example quickly of creating a set of all the squares from 1 to 144 and then a set of all the even numbers from 1 to 1,000, and then finding the intersection, and it should print out those numbers there. Actually, that was a question. What do you think happens if you changed int to int32 up the top, that in the set? So range set takes one type parameter, which is the type of the elements of the set. So if you change that to int32, I'm not sure myself, I just thought of this question this afternoon. Sorry? I think it won't compile. Probably the ad will say you've got to cast it to an int32. Yeah. All right, the implementation. Yeah, I used the go-to-go tool. It's pretty good actually, and it's got excellent support for most things, especially tests. It did have like a few things, size of which I might mention quickly in a second. I created my range set to be compatible with Inland's Taylor's set, so that you could just use it as a replacement when it's appropriate. There's a few little things like it has to be, the element types have to be integers. Len, because you can have huge number of elements now, len, Inland's Taylor's len just returns an integer, which might not be big enough for some types of sets. And most things are order log at worst, although Daniel pointed out that I do some memory shifting, which makes it order n instead of order r, where r is the number of ranges, not order n. So it's fast. You can another facility is you can access the ranges themselves if you want that. Elements are processed in order, so there's functions to iterate through them and to process them in different ways, and you can actually send them to channels. Generic channels are an interesting thing, which I probably should have mentioned, which I think might be a really interesting thing for Go. Next slide. Now, one of the, how much time have I got?
Oh, sorry, no, I said 10 minutes before, you're fine.
Okay. One of the problems I had in writing my code was finding the minimum value of an int type, because you've got int types have various sizes. So I wrote this bit of code. It sort of was kludgy. I thought there was probably a better way to do it, but it worked. And then one day I downloaded the latest go-to-go tool, and it didn't work. And I because if it's complaining about unsafe.sizeof, you can't use it on a generic type. So I complained about this, and Robert Griesman said, no, we're not supporting size of a generic type. And I said, well, it worked before. And he said, no, it couldn't have. Anyway, it was sort of working, but whether it actually, I think they should support unsafe size of on generic types. He doesn't seem to think so, or might have changed his mind by now. This was about 6 months ago or more. So, because I complained, he very nicely, I was trying to work out some code to do it myself, but he very nicely gave me this bit of code, which, can you see this loop? So you've got, I don't know if you can work this out, but S is shifted, so it goes from 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, which means that M becomes the maximum of 4 different int types, the minimum. And so it stops. Anyway, it's a clever little bit of code, which probably 20 years ago I would have thought of straight away, but I was just trying to, there is a way to do this, I just couldn't work it out. And because I complained, I probably would have worked it out, but Robert sort of instantly said, just do it this way. So I grabbed it, and he also said, If you want to make it fast, you probably should unroll the loop, which is what I did here, and it made it about 20 times faster, which is really good. And that's like executes in, is it 10 nanoseconds or something on my machine anyway. Okay. So this range set is now ready to go for Go generics when they appear. All I've got to do is rename all the Go2 files to Go files. And it's great for, as I said now, before, if you've got sets with lots of chunks, large chunks, but if you have a set which is really spaced out like a set of primes, not very good at all. So just use a normal set.
So do you pre-allocate like the whole chunk for the range, or what? Sorry.
No, I store it. It's just store it. I'm using a slice of two integers. So for each range, I'm just storing 2 integers.
Yes.
And it's, as Daniel was pointing out to me last night when I went over this with him, it's probably good for caching as well, because like a map, things are all over the place. And or my previous, I actually wrote this range set in C++ about 20 years ago, but I used a linked list of ranges, and that would have been jumping all over the place too. So I haven't done any benchmarks, but it seems very fast. Anyway.
If you store 2 floats, you can simulate Dedekind cuts.
Oh.
No.
Well, that's handy. I thought about supporting floats, but I wanted to use plus and minus. And
you can use plus and minus on floats.
Yes, I did try it on floats, but it's a bit complicated. Yeah.
Nobody's interested in real numbers anyways.
Anyway, just to reiterate, I think this is a useful set of use for generics. If that was one of the questions before. I've used my previous C++ version of this in like a virtual list box, which like in Windows, you can have a list box where you only see a certain number of elements and you can scroll anywhere and it virtually fills them in from a database. So it doesn't actually have to build a billion, it doesn't have to build a list box of a billion. And then you can, with a range set, you can actually use that to allow them to select large ranges or the whole thing if you press Control A, and store it very efficiently, whereas the Windows list box I was using could handle about 1,000 instead of a billion. I also use it in my hex editor for highlighting. So if you highlight bits and remembers them and it comes back, it remembers all the different sections in your hex or your file that you've highlighted. Questions? No? Yeah?
You said you originally implemented this in C++. What was the first use case that inspired you to go ahead and create it?
Okay, the question was, what was the first use case that inspired me to implement it in C++? Well, it was actually the list box that I just mentioned a minute ago. So, yeah. Okay, sorry. I actually wrote an article for the C and C++ Users Journal. It was a generic class like this one, but it was compatible with the STL, which is the C++ standard template library. This STL set class, but obviously you can only use it for integers, but otherwise you can use it as a drop-in replacement for standard set. Didn't really use my notes. Yes?
The constraints package, have they pretty much agreed on, do you reckon that'll fall under the Go compatibility promise? So we'll never be able to take one away from it, but they might be able to add new constraints in the future. Or, that's not your question to answer, but from what you
As far as
if like the small number of things that they've currently said, these are what's going to.
well, I think if they want to keep things compatible, they won't remove any existing constraints.
I'm just worried about the same thing with C++ templates where they keep going. Oh, we've got this one.
so many monads.
You can add to it. They can accrete. Like if they added a UE 128 type, they can add that in. That'd be fine.
Yeah, I mean, so, Mark just said they can add new things in. I think,
but
and
also
then
like trying to maintain the promise to keep things relatively simple. Right now, it seems quite limited, and I can't think of too many things that they've missed out. But I'm just worried about future creep.
yeah, well, I mean, if they added int 128, they'll just add it to the existing types, and you won't have to worry about.
In the current list, is like you've got comparable. Do they have something similar to, say, diffable that'll give you an actual, like I can get from these types an actual difference, so that would include all the ints and float, possibly depending on how you define the things like vectors and stuff as well.
The word you're looking for is called ring.
That's the word.
A difference. What do you?
Like something that instead of just saying it is less than,
Yeah.
give me a number or an actual exact value of how much something can be less than something. So that your
subtraction is support subtraction.
Subtraction would be supported.
Yeah, well, yeah, you've only got the.
Maybe not just on the symbols, like vectors and stuff.
You can just have a constraint which supports numeric operations.
But you've got a sticker. I already got one, yeah. I was just listening to what you guys were talking about. Is this anything similar to, because I come from like a scripting background, so like JavaScript, Python, that kind of crazy language. Awesome, but yeah, quite, I don't know, eventful to write stuff on it. So if you wanted to do stuff like generics or something very similar to, like in Python, and you wanted to compare two types, instead of saying, oh, with the constraints and everything, I like the idea and whatnot, I can see they're still kind of thinking on it. But you would just, if I want to subtract, I would just add a method called sub. That kind of stuff. And would it be any similar to, I understand that they're trying to do something similar with the constraints, but I know they're never going to do this that I'm talking about in Golang, but would it be similar? And allow you to do whatever you want?
No operator overloading.
Yeah, this Go doesn't have operator overloading.
Yeah, so what they're trying to achieve is a Golang version of this.
I think it's just.
No, you can do that with an interface right now, which
Yeah,
is how Gogonia does it.
True. Yeah,
But you have, well, you just have to use methods rather than.
But I would like to point out to
operators.
Mike that there are only a finite number of magmas and a finite number of monads in the world. If you add them all, it's like 120 of them.
So that's what we need in the constraints.
Yeah.
That's it. All right.
Yeah.
Just you know, not assuming that programs lie in the mathematical realm. Programs may not lie in the mathematical realm.
Okay.
What with Turing completeness and all
Let's
that.
not get into it.
Yes, get me a few drinks and get Gary a few drinks and Mike.
Yeah.
On that note.
I don't know if
Anybody
I.
have any more questions?
Yeah.
So you said that your original use case for this was your, like when you wrote in C++ was this list box. Was there something that inspired you to write it again in Go, or is it just like to use generics?
It was basically someone saying there's no practical use for generics in Go, as I said before. But I also wanted to just try out generics and see if I can find any problems, help them test it before they actually release it. The Go-to-Go tool was huge. It was really impressive. And they used that to create, I don't know if anybody's tried the Go-to-Go playground, which basically you can just go in and type in some generic code and test it straight away. It's so easy and cool.
I've actually tried that myself.
Oh, right.
Sorry, I had to say that. It's the only bit of code I've done before my whole entire life, and it's the Go playground. Sonia Hamilton taught me.
Oh, but not the Go, not the normal Go playground.
Oh, damn it.
There's a Go-to-Go playground, which, like the Go playground just supports the normal Go language. Go-to-Go playground supports the generics as well. But it's just an extension, basically. But I mean, that's good.
All right.
Any more questions, anybody?
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, and thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
No worries.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming tonight. It's really been so nice to have you all here again. And I'm hoping that we can have this as a regular thing like it was once before, a monthly occurrence.
Yeah, it's enough now.
So yeah, I think this is us wrapped up for the evening now. If you don't have anything to rush off home to or whatever, then I think there's a few of us that might be going for